Hey, hi everyone. I'm Reanne Olivier. I am Haitian American. I am from New York, and I am part co-founder of Africa Matters Initiative.
Hi everyone, I'm Farai Mubaiwa. I am South African. My dad is Zimbabwean, so I call myself an African hybrid. I'm living in Joburg, South Africa, and I'm also one of the co-founders for Africa Matters. And we're really excited today to be able to talk to you about Africa Matters. You can get to know us as the founders, what our vision is, what our goals are, and where exactly we're going.
So just looking at your interests and just trying to delve a little bit more into getting to know you. What made you get an inspiration to start Africa Matters? Because I know you came to me with the idea to help you out in terms of launching it, but like what sparked an interest within you to start it?
So I think what was really awesome is being able to come to you with the idea and to find someone who's able to make the vision even better. And because of that, we were able to launch Africa Matters in April 2015. But before then, and it's not only months before, but years before, there's so many different things that unsettled me about the continent, particularly in how we as Africans were interacting with each other. The first thing was having grown up in South Africa with a Zimbabwean parent and half the family being from Zim, the xenophobic attacks were really, really concerning. And I mean, it was concerning for me who grew up in a privileged household. I couldn't imagine how much worse it was for people who didn't have the privileges that I had. And in my head, I could not grasp the fact that as Africans, we are mistreating each other. And it's not even xenophobia, it's Afrophobia.
Yeah.
Because we don't do that to white Africans. We don't do that to Europeans, but we do it to black Africans, which is such a problem. I think the other thing that really bothered me is this constant negative narrative of Africa. Whenever anything happens in the news, the world doesn't react until they see pictures of dead black African bodies. And you saw that with for example, the Charlie Hebdo attacks in 2015. 3 days later, there were the attacks in Baga, Nigeria, in which there was minimal reaction to that. No one wore I Am Baga at the Oscars. No one wore, no celebrities stood in solidarity. A lot of our presidents went to Paris to march down the streets. Who was in Nigeria marching, So it was just so concerning that, as Africans, we're just not showing up for one another.
Yeah.
I'd say the last thing is that we don't know that much about each other, and it's an issue.
I do remember when you approached me with the idea, and it was really interesting because I don't think we've ever actually sat down and had a conversation about what it meant to be African, or like what the current narrative was at the time. And I think for me, like moving to South Africa in particular, I had this idea that I was going to come into a space that, Africans embrace Africanism, and then like coming here, you could see the Afrophobia all over the place. You'll see like, because of my accent, I would be respected a bit more, or like everyone wanted to assimilate or be like, from the UK, or they want to be from America, and I'm just like, I'm trying to understand your culture.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand your history. I'm trying to understand who you all are as people, because the narrative that I have always found, like from growing up and going to school in the States, is just that, Africa is poor and stricken, and like people are uneducated, high unemployment. Yes, high unemployment is true to an extent, but you can't say that, people are malnourished and they're uneducated. And like I'm meeting a lot of intelligent African youth, but they're just because they hear my accent or they know where I come from, it's kind of like they belittled themselves to think that they're less than. And so that was a huge concern for me. And then also being in South Africa made me like kind of realize my identity. Thank you once again for giving me the opportunity. I remember when you approached me, I was like, I'm not African, so what do you want me to do? Like, are you sure? I don't ever want to like overstep my boundary. Like I could always be a support, but I don't ever want to walk around and try to claim everybody else's narratives. And I try to take the experience as a learning curve as a human being growing up in the West, and just kind of knowing my place.
My next question to you is, How has the journey been with Africa Matters thus far? And what for you has been the biggest success?
It's been very interesting because when we first started, we started out as a movement.
Yeah.
So, we did this whole social media campaign, like, what does it mean to be African? We had these, I don't even know why I'm not remembering them, but we had all these different hashtags.
Yeah.
And I remember when we were studying together, we were on campus and we had like all these flyers, and we had other people take these flyers and pick phrases that pertain to them and their African identity, and taking pictures of it and tagging themselves on Facebook, but then actually thinking about it in the aftermath. And then a lot of people approached us and were like, what are you, like, are you doing a workshop? Are you doing a panel discussion? What more are you doing? And then we decided to host our first workshop. No, actually it was a panel discussion, but we called it a workshop, which was funny, on African identity.
Yeah.
And what does it mean to be African? And we had a very interesting, diverse panel, and we had a huge turnout.
Yeah.
And it was very surprising to see how, these types of conversations were not being had, but they were needed and desired. But I guess no one really knew what platform to actually bring that to them. And so I think that's pretty much how the journey and the experience has been thus far.
Yeah.
It's like this rapid growth of,
absolutely.
People hearing that you're looking to change the African narrative through youth empowerment. And it's, it says a lot, there are lots of organizations or companies that use the rhetoric, changing the African narrative, but looking at African politics, looking at African history, youth are never necessarily the ones who are holding that type of power or controlling that type of narrative. And so being able to be in a position where we are able to support and create these different platforms for youth to become empowered within themselves.
I think what's really awesome about the reach of Africa Matters is that it's not just online, but it's also through physical workshops. So online, what's really great is that we use our social media to educate. So whether it's Instagram posting educational photos, or whether it's online campaigns, something that we recently launched as part of our youth leadership development program is the webinars. And the webinars have been such an awesome way to get young African change makers and activists from different parts of the continent talking about something they're leading. And it's been awesome to see how we started that in March, in fact in May, and it's grown significantly. I mean, our latest video on climate change had about 2,000 views from across the continent and even the diaspora, which was amazing. Aside from the online webinars that we've got, our physical workshops are really, really important as well, and they ensure that our reach is we're not really reaching numbers, but there's a tangible change. So we've got our 3 programs, the Schools Leadership Development Program, which is really awesome because we're working with schools in both South Africa and in Senegal, and it's been awesome to see how that has a possibility of growing to Zim. It'll be amazing to see that materialize. And we're teaching young people between 12 and 18 about leadership skills, soft skills, social entrepreneurship, confidence building. How do you lead at a young age? And it's not something that we're often taught in school. In school, you're often taught that you can only be a leader once you've got a degree. But that's not the case. We need a lot more young African leaders, starting from age 9 even. If you see an issue in your community, step up and fix it. The other cool program which complements the schools program is the Youth Leadership Development Program, which is, I think what's great about Africa Matters is that we're not only focusing on your professionals, because we do have career coaching as part of this program. Our webinars are also very educational, but we're also focusing on unemployed youth. How do we create opportunities for unemployed youth across the continent? How do we upskill these youth? But I think more than that, we are aligned with what does the continent need. So you and I have often sat and read UNICEF reports, African Union reports about this emerging youth demographic, and how do we harness this so that it's not an economic burden but rather an economic opportunity. And I think, and it's something you mentioned earlier, what makes Africa Matters unique is that we are changing the narrative through empowering African youth with tangible skills and ways in which they can then empower and impact their own communities. And I think that's not something you see every day, where there's a focus on African youth about giving them tangible skills for them to be able to empower their communities rather than a very prescriptive approach.
Yeah.
I'd like to find out from you, where do you see Africa Matters in 5 years' time?
I think just to start, I would love to see 20 active hubs. Like, not just having hubs, just saying, oh, you know, we're here in this country, but like literally having full-fledged teams that are working with governments, nonprofit organizations. It could be on an international scale or more so grassroots scales, companies as well, to actually leverage and, you know, produce output within their communities. You know, get these sessions out, get these trainings in, and try to get as much youth population as possible. The second element stemming from the first would be creating employment for youth throughout the 20 hub countries, right? To work within, then also trying to see if that there is possibility for opening up different growth within the workspace. And then also even outside of work, you know, the social entrepreneurship element, you know, sparking up more young entrepreneurs. Thirdly, honestly, I would love to see us to have funding.
Amen.
You know, it's definitely been like a huge challenge to self-support, you know, the organization, as we have for the past 4 years. And luckily, we've been very, very lucky and privileged to have great networks and support for people who have resources who could just allow us to have spaces for our venue spaces, you know, some schools who actually believe in our work, you know, try to profit in that sense, try to donate and assist in that ends. But yeah, I think the funding element would allow us to reach so much more youth, because you know, a lot of people don't really realize that the capital cities are not where the majority, it's not the only place where majority of youth are based. And if we can be able to get into different rural areas, and then if we're able to get way more volunteers but support them in terms of transportation or what have you, and those who understand local languages, you know, that's really important. I think that's one of the biggest burdens for us, because there's no way we're gonna know like up to 10 different languages, you know, respectively between ourselves. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest components for me, and like where I would love to see us in the next 5 years. So like 20 hubs, job opportunities for our youth, and then a very comfortable funding stream that will allow us to really get a huge output of reach.
Yeah. So we've got the passion, but I think what's been most disappointing is that the support hasn't been coming from African philanthropists. And I think, I mean, we'd expect that as African youth, the support would come from African philanthropists, boom, bada boom, impact, everyone's happy. What we've learned the hard way is that very often the support either comes from ourselves or comes from international funders. I mean, you and I were most recently approached by an international funder who want to actually look at investing in Africa Matters. And I remember when we first got the email, we were like, wait, what? Is this true? Is this a scam? But it was so fantastic to be recognized for the work that we do and the impact that we have in a time when I think we've been so disheartened about it. So what we find statistically is that it's much easier for white men, white women, or black men to get funding into their businesses or organizations than it is for black women. And I think that's so unfortunate. More so when you are doing work that aims to uplift so many around you. More so when you've got the receipts to show, here is our impact with our limited funding. Please invest in us. So I'd say, you know, my call to African philanthropists is trust us as young women to be the change that you want to see in the continent. Because Africa, demographically speaking, is young and woman and black. So here we are. Trust us to be able to make changes that we want to see in Africa. If we say that, you know, this African youth population is an opportunity, give us the funding so that we can realize this statement, so that it's not just a statement to comfort us, but that it actually becomes a reality. And I mean, I must say that's been challenging and disappointing, But I hope that the plea in this video will come through.
Yeah.
That here we are, we're working really, really hard. All we need is a few African investors and philanthropists to believe in us, and our impact will multiply.
Yeah.
And we've got African youth that are taking the continent forward. All we need is the backing to do so.
Yeah.
So obviously it's not just limited to financial means, but give us treasure, give us your talent, and give us time. You know, support us, give us your time, mentor us, so that we can make this impact.